Everybody, this is Mr. Gosler. Today we're going to be doing a lesson covering world history. So if you could please head over to your Google Classroom page, head to the Classwork tab, and please open up for me both your Module 20/21 note sheet, as well as Part 1 of Topic 6 in Module 20/21. The title of this slideshow is called Aggressors, Invade Nations. Alright, so topic 6 is the last topic in Module 20/21, but there are two parts. We're going to go through part 1 today, and we'll pick up tomorrow with our final lesson for world history in part 2. With that being said, you're going to be putting your notes down today under topic 6, Aggressors Invade Nations. It is the last section for your note sheet on Module 20/21. Alright, so in Europe, we saw the rise of fascist dictatorships, like the one in Italy, led by Benito Mussolini, the one in Germany, led by Adolf Hitler. But at this point, both Germany and Italy, alongside two other nations, Japan and the Soviet Union, will start invading foreign nations to expand their influence during the 1930s. In the early 20th century, Japan would be the first nation to really challenge the territory and influence of Asian nations. This came at the tail end of an industrial age for Japan, in which they would advance extremely quickly, growing their military to more or less be able to challenge their neighboring nations like China and even Russia. And this also came about after World War I, when Japan maybe didn't get the best deal for assisting the Allied powers and would like to continue to expand its influence into the mainland part of Asia. This movement of what we call militarists in Japan will be primarily led by Japanese military leaders who push for specifically aggressive policies in order to acquire resources in the mainland part of Asia. Japan is quite large and does have quite a bit of resources, but just not enough to continue to support the growth that they went through in the early 1900s. So they start to set their sights on China and Korea. And one military leader is going to shine probably the most, the man pictured here, Hideki Tojo. Now, during the Great Depression that would occur from 1929 into the 1930s, you would see many civilians in Japan start to lose a lot of the faith that they had in the government that had already been established. And as a result, many started to instead turn their eyes towards the military leaders who made promises to restore military control without changing any types of government structures within the Japanese government. They planned to do this specifically by going through a figurehead in Japanese politics. That is their emperor, Emperor Hirohito. These militarists would promote nationalism. They would promote seeking out territory and resources abroad, particularly in China. And in 1931, at the height of the Great Depression, Japan's military would carry out an invasion on the Chinese mainland, specifically the northeast region of China known as Manchuria. Now, this occurred during the Chinese Civil War, as we discussed previously in Module 20/21. This region was known to be abundant in both iron and coal, both needed in industrialization. And at the time, the Communist Party in China was being pushed northward towards this region. As a result, after this invasion, you would see the Chinese Civil War come to an end, and the Communists actually would join forces with the Kuomintang, which were the nationalist Chinese government officials at the time. Now, the Japanese would end up establishing a puppet government in the region and more or less stop any Chinese kind of military groups from entering the region to try to take it back, further expanding Japanese influence into the region. But that military general that we were discussing earlier was not happy with just having Manchuria. Hideki Tojo will start to challenge Japanese roles in the League of Nations. Japanese officials were called to the League of Nations after the invasion of Manchuria, and the League of Nations would try to bring about a peaceful end to this. They protested the Japanese invasion of Manchuria and tried to force them to return the territory to China. But Japan would end up ignoring these objections, and in 1933 would withdraw their membership from the League of Nations. Now, the military general Hideki Tojo would then order the Japanese military to launch a full-scale invasion on China from their already invaded sections in Manchuria and Korea. Very quickly, they would capture major Chinese cities in the north, like Beijing and Nanjing. And unfortunately for the Chinese, even though they had a much larger military and in many cases better equipment, the Chinese military could not hold and unfortunately would lose hundreds of thousands of soldiers in this invasion. Specifically in the city of Nanjing, the most brutal fighting would occur. Many Chinese soldiers would actually submit or would forfeit to the Japanese, who saw them as being weak or humiliated, and would end up actually committing murder upon many of them that had actually put down their arms. The same thing went for Chinese civilians as well. The Japanese unfortunately murdered hundreds of thousands of Chinese citizens and civilians during this invasion. The Kuomintang, led by Zhang Jixi or Chiang Kai-shek, would retreat into the south, specifically to Chongqing. And at the same time, you would see the communist forces in the north carrying out guerrilla fighting now against the Japanese instead of the Kuomintang, effectively trying to kind of stave off this Japanese invasion. So now I'm going to have you watch this video about the rise of Imperial Japan. It will also discuss, some of their downfalls and how they will eventually fall apart as well. And then we'll have a question to answer.